This is the title for Appendix 10. So we're going to start simplifying roots and rationals. So we're going to spend 2 days on this appendix. The homework is, again, this is our last one in the appendix. Make sure you have graph paper, because starting on Friday we will be graphing. So make sure you have some graph paper. I do have some, but I don't know if I have enough for 75 people. So Friday we actually start graphing. Homework 5 has to be on graph paper to get full credit because you have graphing. So graphing has to be done on graph paper. So just kind of keep that in mind if you haven't gotten that so far. All right, so does everyone have the title in their notes? Can we get started? All righty. So, we're not doing that. We don't have time. All right, go ahead and copy this down. This is just the definition of a rational exponent. A rational exponent is just a radical. So I'll give you a minute to copy that down, and then I'll explain that definition. Thought somebody was knocking at the door. Okay. Just take a seat anywhere, and then I'll tell you if it's open later. But just take a seat. Okay. So another way to write a root is with a fraction, with the exponent that's a fraction. So the main thing to keep in mind is this number, which is called, this is called your index. That's going to be the denominator of your fraction. The most common index, when we do a square root, the index is 2. So the most common index is a square root, which has an index of 2. Another way to write the square root, so if we have the square root of 25, that can also be written as 25 to the power of 1/2. That's what that means. So you won't always see it written with that radical symbol. It could also be a fraction, an exponent that's a fraction. If you were to have, for example, 8, and let's say this is an index of 3. Let me zoom in. And that's all raised to the power of 2. We can write that as a fraction as 8 to the power of what? Do you think it's going to be 2 over 3 or 3 over 2? 2 over 3. So that's just something to keep in mind as we start simplifying roots. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. All right, so go ahead, take a minute. And copy down these first 3. We're going to simplify them together. So examples, simplify. We're going to simplify each one of these together. So 49, so again, my invisible index is a 2. I'll zoom back out in a minute. We'll just do one at a time. So my invisible index is a 2, which means I need a pair. I need a pair. I need a pair of the same numbers. And do I have a pair? 7 times 7 is 49. Do you agree? So because my index is 2, that means I'm looking for a pair, and I do have a pair of 7s. And that's why the square root of 49 is 7. We're not solving an equation, so we don't need to include the plus minus. We're simplifying, so we don't need a plus or minus. So that's why the square root of 49 is 7. It's because we have a pair of 7s. Okay? Now let's look at number 2. So now my index changed to a 3. And 27 can also be written as 3 times 3 times 3. If you were to make a factor tree or a cake, which we're not, I don't have time, but if you wanted to do that in your homework or on the test, if you were to take 27, and if you keep dividing it by 3, you would see that 27 is composed of a triple pair of 3s. So when the index is 3, that means I need a group of 3s. I need a group of 3 people, of 3 numbers. And I do have a group, and that would be of 3. So that's why the cube root of 27 is 3. Let me zoom out. So this is my answer. This is my answer. Any questions so far? Okay, anytime you see a negative, it doesn't matter what the index is, you have to take away that negative. So underneath this cube root, I really have 2 numbers. I have a -1 and I have an 8. And I'm going to write this rule just in case you don't know this. If you have a root and this number is odd, well, let's start off with even. If this number is any even number, so if your index is even and you're taking the even index of -1, that does not exist, which means we just have to leave it. We cannot simplify. You cannot take the 4th root, the square root, the 6th root, the 8th root of a negative. Okay? But if it's odd, conversely, and now let's say this is an odd number, like a 3, a 5, a 7, then that equals -1. So that's kind of something to keep in mind as you're simplifying radicals, that you can take the cube root of a -1, but you cannot take the square root of a negative or the 4th root of a negative. All right, so now let's go ahead and simplify this out. So the cube root of -1 is going to give you -1. And does anyone know what the cube root of 8 would be? 2. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So the cube root of 8 is 2. When you multiply those 2 numbers together, your final answer is -2. And that would be your answer to number 3. All right, any questions about 1, 2, or 3? All right, let's keep moving then. Let's look at 4, 5, and 6. Go ahead and copy that down. So 4th root of 16. So does anyone know what number to the power of 4 is going to give you 16? 2. So this is the same as saying the 4th root of 2 to the 4th. Because 2 to the 4th is 16. That's a 4. That don't look like a 4 though. So that would cancel. My final answer is just 2. For number 5, again, we have that negative, so we need to take it out. Now, is this going to be does not exist, or is this going to equal -1 based on the rule that I just gave you? So we have to leave this. We can't do anything with that because this is even. So this is going to stay. And we already know that this equals 2. So my final answer is going to be 2 times the 4th root of -1. We do not say that that is I. The square root of -1 is I. 4th root of -1, you got to take calculus or something like that. We just going to leave it alone. We're not going to mess with it. It's just 2 times the 4th root of -1. Okay, when we're talking about variables, this is division. So I like to think of it as people. This is how many people I have, and this is how many people I have in a group. If I have 8 people, how many groups of 4 can I make with 8 people? 2. Do I have anybody left over? All right, I'm going to do this the long way because I know we got people who may not understand, and I want to make sure we are getting this. This is the same as saying you have the 4th root, and if you make 8, the letter X 8 times. Sorry, I'm running out of juice. And I circle groups of 4. How many groups did I circle? I circled 2 groups. Nobody was left over. So that means that the 4th root of x to the power of 8 is x squared. That's how you're going to look at a variable. All right, so that's our introduction. So now let's get to the ones that are going to be on the test, shall we? Let's get to the longer ones. So this one is cut off. I'm actually going to skip this one. I'm going to skip over this one. All right, let's look at 7. Write what would you say that would be for 7? You got 10 people and you're making groups of 5. Don't say it out loud. And then do the same thing for number 9. All right, so I'm not going to make 10 Ys, but if I were to make 10 Ys, how many groups of 5 could I create? 2. Would anybody be left out? No, that's my answer. All right, let's look at question 9. I like to separate this because there's really 2 different things. I have A's and I have B's. So for my apples, I got 12 apples. How many groups of 4 can I make with 12 apples? 3. I got 8 bananas. How many groups of 4 can I make with 8 bananas? And that would be your answer. See, these go pretty fast. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. Any questions? Do y'all remember this from algebra? This is algebra 2. This whole semester is algebra 2. Just really fast. And then second semester, now that's all new material. Second semester is not really new material. There's a lot of geometry. That's what I'll say. There's a lot of geometry in second semester. All right, let's keep moving. Let's look at 10 and 11. Now they're getting a little bit more complicated. They just gradually build up. Okay, we almost done for today. We only got to hit to number 13. These go fast. Tomorrow, homework 3 is due. Tomorrow, homework 3 is due. And then Friday, this is the homework we're working on now. I'll be finished teaching this part tomorrow. So that'll give you 2 days to do homework for. All right, so again, there's 3 different things underneath this radical. What is the index right here? It's invisible. So that means I'm looking for pairs. Okay, so I like to start by separating it. Each one, because I'm looking at each one separately. So I'm going to rewrite this with their own radical. So I got the square root of a to the 10th. And then I have the square root of b. And then I have the square root of c to the 9th. So let's just go one at a time. So I need pairs. With 10 people, how many pairs can I make? I got 10 apples. How many pairs can I make? 5. So that means that that's going to equal a to the 5th. That gets to come out. If I only have one person, this is only one banana, can I make a pair? So it has to stay. So I'm going to make a little square root, and that's where I'm going to put my leftovers. The things that can't come out, it just has to stay. So it can't come out. I need more in order to break out of jail. All right, I got 9 cats. How many pairs can I make? 4. If you need to go to the bathroom, you can. So I have 4 cats. But see, there is 1 left over, right? Because I had 9, and there was 1 cat left over. So that cat has to stay in jail. It's going to be here with the B. And that's my answer. That's it. So if you don't have a partner, you have to stay. Yes. Yes. And how do we know the pair? How do we know that it's a 2? How did I know that I'm looking for pairs? Because the common index is 2. Yeah, this index right here. So whenever you don't see a number, you can write a 2. If you don't see a number, that means that it's a 2. We're looking for pairs. All right, if you haven't already, go ahead and copy down 11. 11, we're looking for groups of 3. And there's actually 4 things underneath that cube root. I have to take the cube root of -1. Remember, you always separate that negative out. Then I have to take the cube root of 40. Then I need to take the cube root of x to the power of 14. And then I need to take the cube root of y to the power of 10. So I'm looking at each one of those separately. And if you don't know your perfect cubes, like we know our perfect squares. I actually put the perfect squares in the front on the pink in the front of the room. But if you don't know your perfect cubes, you can always make a short little list. Like 2 to the power of 3, we know is 8. I know 3 to the power of 3 is 27. I know 4 to the power of 3 is 64. And that's really all you need. You don't need to go that much further. Okay, so cube root of -1, is it D and E or is it -1? Which one is it going to be? -1, because it's odd. All right, which one of these numbers can go into 40? Can I divide, which one can divide into 40? Not subtract, but divide. 8. Does everyone agree that 8 is a factor of 40? Yeah. 8 times what is 40? All right, so I'm actually going to break this apart to the cube root of 8 times the cube root of 5. So the cube root of 8 is 2. And then this has to stay. I'm just going to highlight that and come back to it in a minute. Okay, you have 14 people. How many groups of 3 can you make with 14 people? 4. So I'm going to take this and separate this down to the cube root. So this is the cube root of x to the 12th and the cube root of x squared. So I already know that the cube root of x to the 12th is x to the 4th. This here has to stay. And then lastly, y to the power of 10, let me break that apart, hold on. All right, so y to the power of 10, that is going to separate into, because I'm looking for a factor of 3, so I'm going to break that apart to y9. That's an ugly 3. Let me make that better, hold on. There we go. And then cube root of just a y. With 9 people, how many groups can I make of 3? 3. And this has to stay. So now we're finished. We're going to just clean this up. All of these numbers here, all of these numbers are going to be multiplied together in front. So when I multiply these 4 that I have highlighted in yellow, then that gives me -2 x to the 4th, y to the 3rd. And then I have the cube root of a 5, a x squared, and a y. So you have to go step by step. And that's how you're going to do that on the test. You're going to look at it step by step. It's not a race. You don't get a cookie if you finish first. No prizes. All right, last 2. Any questions about 11? 11 is getting more advanced. That's the energy you got to bring on the test. That kind of energy. All right. Last 2. Got some fractions. Remember, a fraction is a radical. What do you have to have in order to add a fraction? Common denominator, right? Do we have a common denominator for number 12? Yeah. All right, so we could just add them together. And when I add them together, I just get x to the power of 7/3. All right, so now let's write this with a radical. So I have my radical, x is underneath. This number here, that's my denominator. We call that the index. So that would go right here. And then this number, that's the power. The power can either be underneath or we could put it on the outside, either way. So I'm going to put it here. So I have 7 people. How many groups, you can sit anywhere. How many groups of 3 can I make with 7 people? 2. Because we can write this as the cube root of x to the 6 times the cube root of x. So this gives you x squared times the cube root of x. And that would be your final answer. So the first thing you want to do, tomorrow we'll do some that don't have a common denominator. First thing you want to do is write it as a fraction, then you're going to write it as a radical, and then you're going to simplify the radical. All right, so let's look at number 13. They all have a common denominator. So I'm going to add them together. So I can add these two together. 7 plus 3 gives you 10. So that would be b to the power of 10/4. Divided by b to the power of 1/4. Anybody remember from Algebra 1, what do you do with your exponents when you're dividing them? Subtract them. What's 10/4 minus 1/4? 9/4. So now we have b to the power of 9/4. Let's go ahead and write this in radical form. This is my index. So that's going to go here. And then this is my power. So that's going to go underneath. So when I separate this out, I have the 4th root of b to the power of 8 times the 4th root of b. So what's going to be the 4th root of b to the power of 8? Yep, 2. If you have 8 people, how many groups of 4 can you make? 2. So this is going to give you b squared. And then that b, that has to stay. And that is your final answer. All right. Any questions? Yes. Jaden first. When I do this part here?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Like the 2 numbers inside the fourth group add together equal 9. Is that basically what you do?
Exactly. Yeah. If I'm splitting it apart, so if you look over here, see I had a 6 and a 1, I get 7. Yeah, if you're going to break it apart, then one of them should be a factor of that index. And then Daniel? Oh, right here? Oh, for number 12. Okay. So right here, if you have 6 people, how many groups of 3 can you make with 6 people? 2. All right.